There are moments in life when everything you thought you knew crumbles beneath your feet, like sand slipping through fingers that can no longer hold on tight enough to keep the world from disappearing. I am 73 years old, and my name is Margaret, though some days I wake up and cannot remember if that name belongs to me or to someone I once knew in a dream that feels more real than the morning light streaming through curtains I do not recognize. My husband Richard has been the anchor in my storm for 47 years, the steady hand that guides me back when I wander too far into the fog that creeps through my mind like uninvited guests who refuse to leave. But lately something has changed, and it is not just the memories slipping away like water through cupped palms, or the mornings when I wake up terrified because the woman in the mirror looks like a stranger wearing my face. It is Richard, my Richard. The man who promised to love me in sickness and in health has started disappearing every Tuesday afternoon at exactly 2 o'clock, and he thinks I do not notice because the disease has stolen so much of me already that surely it must have taken my ability to see what is right in front of my eyes. If you have ever loved someone with your whole heart and felt them slowly drift away while you stand helpless watching the distance grow wider with each passing day, then you know the special kind of terror that lives in my chest right now. If you have ever questioned your own mind, wondered if what you are seeing is real or just another trick played by a brain that no longer follows the rules it once knew so well, then you understand why I am telling you this story. Because I need you to know that even when the world tells you that you are too broken to trust yourself, even when the disease tries to convince you that nothing you think or feel or remember can be believed, there are still moments of absolute clarity that cut through the confusion like lightning splitting a dark sky. And in one of those moments, I decided to follow my husband to the place he goes every Tuesday, to the secret he thinks is hidden safely away from the wife whose mind cannot hold on to secrets anymore. I need to tell you what I found, because it will break your heart and heal it at the same time, and you need to hear this before I forget it all over again. Every Tuesday morning starts the same way now. Richard makes me breakfast. Scrambled eggs with just a little bit of cheese the way I have always liked them, even though some mornings I cannot remember if I have eaten breakfast already or if the memory of eating is from yesterday or last week or 10 years ago. He sets the plate in front of me with such tenderness, such careful attention, as if I am made of glass that might shatter if he moves too quickly or speaks too loudly. His eyes watch me as I eat, and I can see something in them that I cannot quite name, something that looks like sadness wrapped around love, wrapped around a secret that weighs heavy on his shoulders. He kisses my forehead before he leaves, tells me he will be back before dinner, reminds me that Mrs. Patterson from next door will check on me at noon just to make sure I am all right. And then he is gone, driving away in our old blue sedan that has carried us through decades of life together, off to wherever it is he goes on Tuesdays while I sit alone in a house that sometimes feels like home and sometimes feels like a museum filled with artifacts from someone else's life. The first time I noticed the pattern, I thought perhaps I was imagining it. The mind is such a tricky thing when it starts to betray you. It shows you memories that never happened and hides the ones that did, mixes up yesterday with 20 years ago, turns the faces of loved ones into strangers, and strangers into people you swear you have known your entire life. So when I realized that Richard left every Tuesday at the same time, returned at the same time, wore the same careful expression of someone carrying a burden they do not want to share, I questioned myself. I wrote it down in the notebook I keep by my bed, the one where I try to hold on to the pieces of reality that slip away so easily. Tuesday, Richard gone 2 to 6. Tuesday, Richard gone 2 to 6. Tuesday, Richard gone 2 to 6. Week after week, the words appeared in my handwriting that sometimes looks like mine, and sometimes looks like it belongs to someone whose hands shake with age and fear and the weight of losing everything familiar. I asked him once where he went. We were sitting at dinner, the evening light making everything soft and golden, and the question just slipped out before I could stop it. "Where do you go on Tuesdays, Richard?" He looked up from his plate and smiled at me with such gentleness, such patience, and said he had told me already. Did I not remember? He goes to the community center to play cards with his friends, old men like himself who need somewhere to go and something to do with their afternoons. And maybe he had told me. Maybe I had forgotten. Maybe this is just another thing the disease has stolen from me, along with the names of my grandchildren, and the address of the house I grew up in, and the taste of my mother's apple pie that I swear I can almost remember but not quite. But something in his eyes when he answered, something in the way his voice was just a little too steady, just a little too rehearsed, made me write it down again that night. Richard says community center cards with friends, but his eyes say something different. You know that feeling when you know something is wrong, but everyone around you treats you like you are the problem, like your concerns are just symptoms of the disease eating away at your mind, like nothing you think or feel can be trusted because the very organ you use to think and feel has turned against you? That is what it feels like to have Alzheimer's and suspect your husband of hiding something. Every doubt gets doubled because you doubt yourself first. Every suspicion gets questioned because maybe you are just confused again. Maybe you are making up stories to fill in the gaps where memories used to be. Maybe this is just another manifestation of the fog that clouds everything now. But I have lived with this disease long enough to know the difference between the confusion it brings and the clarity that sometimes breaks through. And in those clear moments, I knew with absolute certainty that Richard was lying to me. Before we continue, I want you to know something. If you are watching this because someone you love is living with Alzheimer's or dementia, if you are watching this because you are the caregiver or the family member or the friend trying to navigate this impossible journey, I need you to hear me when I say you are not alone in this. There is a community of people right here who understand the heartbreak and the frustration and the grief of losing someone while they are still standing right in front of you. And if you would take just a moment to subscribe to this channel, you would be joining a family of people who share these stories not to make you sad, but to make you feel seen and understood and less alone in the darkness. Every video here is a reminder that we are all walking this path together, that your pain is valid, that your exhaustion is real, that your love matters even when it feels like it is not enough. Subscribe and you will find comfort here. Subscribe and you will find others who know exactly what you are going through. Subscribe because we need each other in times like these, and because together we can carry burdens that would crush us if we tried to bear them alone. So I made a plan. It took me 3 weeks to make the plan because some days I would forget I was making a plan at all, and other days I would remember the plan but forget why I was making it, and still other days the plan would seem so clear and necessary that I could not understand why I had not acted on it already. I wrote everything down in my notebook, step by step, because that is how I live now, one written instruction at a time, one reminder after another, a trail of breadcrumbs I leave for myself so I can find my way back to what I was doing and why I was doing it. The plan was simple. On Tuesday, I would pretend everything was normal. I would eat the breakfast Richard made. I would kiss him goodbye. I would wave as he drove away. And then I would call a taxi, because I do not drive anymore. Because the last time I tried to drive, I ended up 20 miles from home with no idea how I got there or where I was going. And I would follow him to wherever he goes every Tuesday at 2 o'clock. The hardest part was not the planning. The hardest part was trusting myself enough to follow through. Because what if I was wrong? What if he really was just playing cards with friends and I was about to humiliate myself and him by showing up like some paranoid wife who cannot tell reality from delusion anymore? What if this was just the disease making me see patterns that do not exist, connections that are not there, secrets where there is only innocent routine? But then I would remember his eyes when he lied to me about the community center. I would remember the way his voice sounded just a little too careful, a little too practiced. I would remember the heaviness he carries when he comes home on Tuesday evenings, like a man who has been somewhere that required more of him than a simple card game ever could. And I would know that whether my mind could be trusted or not, my heart was telling me something important that I needed to hear. The Tuesday I chose to follow him was bright and clear, one of those autumn days when the air smells like wood smoke and dying leaves, and the end of things. Richard made breakfast as always, eggs and toast and orange juice poured into the glass with the small chip on the rim that I always drink from, even though we have a dozen other glasses without chips or cracks or flaws. He was quieter than usual that morning, and I wondered if somehow he knew what I was planning, if after 47 years of marriage he could sense my intentions even when I had written them down and hidden them away in a notebook he would never think to look through. But he kissed my forehead as he always does, reminded me about Mrs. Patterson's noon visit as he always does, told me he would be home before dinner as he always does. And then he left, and I watched through the window as our blue sedan pulled out of the driveway and disappeared down the street that I have lived on for 32 years, but sometimes cannot remember the name of. I waited 10 minutes. I had written that down. Wait 10 minutes after Richard leaves, then call taxi. The phone number for the taxi company was written next to the instruction because even though I have called that number dozens of times since I stopped driving, I can never seem to remember it from one day to the next. The dispatcher recognized my voice, asked me how I was doing today, Mrs. Margaret, and I told her I was fine, even though fine is such a strange word to use when you are planning to follow your husband to his secret life. The taxi arrived 15 minutes later, driven by a young man named Marcus who has driven me before, who knows to speak slowly and clearly, who does not get impatient when I have to check my notebook 3 times to remember where I am supposed to be going. I had written the address down. Richard does not know I found it. 3 weeks ago, I went through his jacket pockets while he was in the shower, something I have never done in 47 years of marriage because I trusted him completely and utterly and without question. But desperation makes thieves of us all, and the disease had already stolen so much from me that taking his privacy felt like a small crime in comparison. The address was written on a piece of paper, folded small and tucked into the inside pocket, close to where his heart beats. 428 Maple Street. I did not recognize the street name. I did not recognize the neighborhood when I looked it up on the map that I can no longer read properly, but tried anyway. All I knew was that it was 20 minutes from our house, in a part of town I had no reason to ever visit, and that Richard went there every Tuesday without telling me why. Marcus, the taxi driver, did not ask questions when I gave him the address. He simply nodded and pulled away from the curb, and I watched my house disappear behind us. The house where I have lived for 3 decades, but that sometimes feels like a place I am visiting for the first time. My hands were shaking. I gripped my notebook tight against my chest like a shield, like proof that I was not crazy, that this was real, that I had good reason to be doing what I was doing. The streets passed by outside the window, and I tried to memorize them, tried to create a map in my mind that would help me find my way home if something went wrong. But the disease does not care about my trying, and the streets all blurred together into an indistinguishable stream of trees and houses and stop signs that could have been anywhere or nowhere. We arrived at 428 Maple Street at 2:30 in the afternoon. I know this because I had written check time when you arrive in my notebook, and I checked my watch 3 times to make sure I was reading it correctly. The house was small and neat, painted a soft yellow with white shutters and a garden full of flowers that were holding on to their last blooms before winter came and took them away. It looked like the kind of house where happy people lived, where nothing bad ever happened, where secrets did not exist. Richard's blue sedan was parked in the driveway next to another car, a red compact that I did not recognize. I asked Marcus to park down the street where we could see the house, but where Richard would not see us if he happened to look out a window. Marcus nodded slowly, and I could see in his eyes that he understood this was not a normal fare, that something significant was happening, but he was kind enough not to ask about it. I sat in that taxi for 10 minutes, maybe 15, maybe an hour. Time moves so strangely now that I can never quite trust my sense of how much of it has passed. I watched the yellow house with its white shutters and its dying flowers, and tried to imagine what was happening inside. Was Richard really playing cards? Was there a group of old men sitting around a table, laughing and betting pennies and telling the same stories they had told 100 times before? Or was there something else, something darker, something that would explain the secrets and the lies and the heaviness he carried home every Tuesday evening? My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, and I had to remind myself to breathe, in and out, the way the doctor taught me to do, when the anxiety gets too bad and the world starts to spin. And then the front door opened. Richard stepped out onto the porch, and he was not alone. There was a woman with him. She was younger than me, maybe 60, maybe younger than that. It is hard to tell ages anymore when your own reflection is a stranger. She had dark hair touched with gray, and she was wearing a blue dress, and she was smiling up at Richard with such warmth, such familiarity, such obvious affection, that my blood turned to ice in my veins. Richard had his arm around her waist, his arm around her waist, like a husband with his wife, like a man with the woman he loves. And they stood there on the porch of that yellow house talking quietly, their heads bent close together, and I could not hear what they were saying, but I did not need to, because their body language was screaming everything I needed to know. He has another wife. The thought came crashing into my mind like a wave against rocks, and I actually gasped out loud, actually made a sound that caused Marcus, the taxi driver, to turn around and ask if I was all right. I could not answer him. I could not speak. I could only stare at my husband of 47 years, standing on a stranger's porch, with his arm around another woman, laughing at something she said, looking at her the way he used to look at me before the disease started taking me away piece by piece. He has another wife. He has replaced me. He has found someone whose mind is not broken, someone who can remember his name and their anniversary and what they had for breakfast, someone who is not a burden or a responsibility or a tragic reminder of what was lost. I need to stop here for a moment, because I know some of you understand exactly what I am feeling right now. I know some of you have felt the terror of being replaced, of being too much trouble, of watching the person you love pull away, because the disease has made you into someone they can barely recognize anymore. And I need you to know that your fear is valid. Your pain is real. You are not imagining things, and you are not alone in feeling this way. If you have ever wondered whether you are still worthy of love when your mind betrays you, if you have ever felt like you are becoming invisible while you are still standing right there, I want you to do something for me right now. I want you to go down to the comments and type these exact words. I am still here. I still matter. That is all. Just those 6 words. I am still here. I still matter. Because you need to say it, and you need to see other people saying it too. You need to know that there is a community of people who see you and hear you, and understand that you are still a person of value and worth, no matter what the disease tries to take from you. So please, go to the comments right now and type, I am still here. I still matter. Do it for yourself. Do it for everyone else who needs to see those words today. Do it because we need to remind each other that we are not disappearing even when it feels like we are fading away. I sat in that taxi and I watched Richard kiss the woman on the cheek. I watched him get into his car and drive away. I watched the woman in the blue dress stand on the porch and wave goodbye with such tenderness that it felt like a knife twisting in my chest. And then she went back inside the yellow house and closed the door, and I was left sitting in a stranger's taxi trying to remember how to breathe around the pain that was crushing my ribs and squeezing my heart and making the whole world tilt sideways. Marcus asked me very gently if I wanted to go home now. I looked down at my notebook where I had written all my careful plans, all my instructions to myself, but I had not written anything about what to do after I found out the truth. I had not prepared for this moment because some part of me, some small hopeful part, had believed I would be wrong, that I would follow Richard and find him at a community center playing cards with friends, and I would feel foolish but relieved, embarrassed but grateful that my suspicions had been just another trick of the broken mind. But I was not wrong, and now I had to decide what to do with this knowledge that was burning a hole through my chest. I told Marcus to wait. I needed to see inside that house. I needed to know who this woman was and what she meant to Richard, and how long this had been going on, and whether everything I thought I knew about my marriage was just another memory that could not be trusted. I got out of the taxi on legs that shook so badly I had to hold onto the car door to keep from falling. Marcus offered to come with me, but I shook my head. This was something I had to do alone. This was my husband, my marriage, my life that was crumbling, and I would face it with whatever dignity I had left. I walked up the path to the yellow house with the white shutters. The garden was full of chrysanthemums and asters, late-season flowers that bloom when everything else is dying. My hand shook as I reached for the doorbell. I pressed it and heard the chime echo inside the house, and I wanted to run, wanted to get back in the taxi and go home and pretend I had never followed Richard, never seen him with another woman, never discovered that the one solid thing in my dissolving world was just another lie. But I stayed. I stood there and I waited, and when the door opened and the woman in the blue dress looked at me with surprise and confusion, I opened my mouth and the words came out before I could stop them. I am Richard's wife, I said, and I know he comes here every Tuesday. The woman's face went pale. Her hand flew to her mouth, and then she did something I did not expect at all. She started to cry. Not angry tears or guilty tears or tears of someone caught in a lie. These were tears of such profound sadness, such deep compassion, that I actually took a step backward, confused, because this was not the reaction I had anticipated. She reached out and took my hand, this stranger who was apparently sharing my husband, and she said in a voice choked with emotion, "Oh, Margaret, oh, sweetheart, please come inside, please. There is something you need to know. I should have left. Every instinct I had told me to turn around and run back to the taxi and go home where it was safe, where I could pretend a little longer that my life had not just shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. But something in her voice, something in the genuine distress on her face, made me follow her inside. The house smelled like vanilla and cinnamon, warm and welcoming, and the living room was filled with photographs on every surface. Photographs of Richard, photographs of this woman, photographs of them together, laughing, embracing, living a whole separate life that I knew nothing about. But then I looked closer at the photographs and my breath caught in my throat. Because there were other pictures too. Pictures of me and Richard on our wedding day, me and Richard with our children when they were small, me and Richard at the beach, at Christmas, at 1,000 different moments throughout our 47 years together. And in the center of the mantel, in a frame that was clearly treasured and dusted and loved, there was a family portrait. Richard and me and this woman and a young man I did not recognize. All of us together, all of us smiling. "Who are you?" I whispered. The woman sat down on the couch and gestured for me to sit beside her. Her hands were shaking as badly as mine. "My name is Sarah," she said, "and Richard is my father." The world stopped. Actually stopped. The air left my lungs, and the floor dropped away beneath my feet, and nothing made sense anymore because Richard did not have children from another marriage. Richard had never been married before me. Richard had told me everything about his life before we met, and there had been no mention of a daughter named Sarah. "I do not understand," I said, and my voice sounded very far away, like it was coming from someone else. Sarah reached over and took both of my hands in hers. "Margaret," she said gently, and there was so much love in the way she said my name that it made me want to cry. "You are confused right now. The disease is making things unclear, but I need you to listen very carefully to what I am about to tell you. I am not Richard's daughter from another marriage. I am your daughter, yours and Richard's. You gave birth to me 52 years ago. My name is Sarah Elizabeth. You chose the name because Elizabeth was your mother's name, and you wanted me to carry a piece of her with me always." "No," I said. "No, that is not right. Richard and I do not have children. We tried for years, and it never happened, and we made peace with it, and it was just the two of us, and that was enough." Sarah's tears were falling freely now, dropping onto our joined hands. She squeezed my fingers gently. "Mom," she said, and that word, that simple word, hit me like a physical blow. "You have said that exact thing to me before, every Tuesday for the past 2 years, since the Alzheimer's got bad enough that you started forgetting us, forgetting me and forgetting Michael, forgetting that you have 2 children who love you more than anything in this world. Every Tuesday, Dad brings you here so you can spend time with me, so I can show you the photographs and tell you stories about our family and try to give you back pieces of what the disease has stolen. And every Tuesday you forget again. Every Tuesday we have to start over." The young man in the photographs. "That is my brother Michael," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "He lives in California with his family. Your 3 grandchildren that you used to spoil rotten every chance you got. And this house, this yellow house that you do not recognize. This is where I live with my husband Tom. You helped me plant that garden out front. Those chrysanthemums were your favorite flowers. You used to say they were brave for blooming when everything else was giving up." I pulled my hands away from hers. This could not be true. This could not be real. I would remember my own children. I would remember giving birth, raising them, watching them grow. Those are not memories that disappear. Those are not things the disease can take away. But even as I thought it, I knew I was wrong, because the disease takes everything. It takes names and faces and entire decades. It takes your first kiss and your wedding day, and the moment you held your baby for the first time. It takes your mother's voice and your father's laugh and the address of your childhood home. It takes everything and leaves you standing in the ruins wondering who you are and who you used to be and whether anything you think you know is actually true. "Look at this," Sarah said, and she handed me a photo album. It was old and worn, the pages soft from being turned over and over. And there I was, younger, so much younger, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a pink blanket. Richard stood beside me, looking impossibly young and radiantly happy. And I could see it now, could see that the baby in the photograph grew up to be the woman sitting next to me, could see Richard's eyes in her face, and maybe my smile in the curve of her mouth. I turned the pages slowly. There were birthday parties and Christmas mornings and first days of school. There were dance recitals and soccer games and graduation ceremonies. There was an entire life, an entire family documented in these photographs that I should have remembered but did not, could not. The disease had taken them all and left nothing but emptiness where these precious memories should have been. "How long?" I asked. "How long have I been forgetting you?" "It started about 3 years ago," Sarah said quietly. "Little things at first. You would forget conversations we had just had. You would ask the same questions over and over, but then it got worse. You stopped recognizing Michael when he called. You started introducing me to people as your friend Sarah instead of your daughter. And then about 2 years ago, you woke up one morning and told Dad that you were so grateful it had just been the two of you all these years, that you had made peace with not having children. He was devastated. We all were. But the doctor said this was normal with Alzheimer's, that the disease can erase entire portions of your life, that you might never get those memories back. So every Tuesday, Sarah continued, Dad brings you here. He does not tell you where you are going because you get anxious and confused if he tries to explain. He just brings you here and I show you the photographs and I tell you about our family. And for a few hours, we pretend that you remember us. And then he takes you home and you forget again. And the next Tuesday we start all over. I looked around the living room with new eyes. The vanilla and cinnamon smell was from candles I had apparently given Sarah for her birthday 3 years ago, before I forgot her birthday existed. The blanket draped over the couch was one I had knitted myself, though I could not remember knitting it or choosing the colors or deciding to give it to someone. The whole house was filled with pieces of me, evidence of a mother's love for her daughter, proof of a relationship that had been stolen from me so completely that I had believed I never had children at all. Why did Richard not tell me? I asked. Why did he let me believe we were childless? Sarah wiped her eyes. Because he tried to tell you, she said. In the beginning, he tried every day. He would show you photographs, bring me to the house to visit, remind you over and over that you were a mother, that we were your children, but it just made you more confused and agitated. You would get so upset, so frustrated that you could not remember us, that it was worse than if he had said nothing at all. So the doctors suggested this instead. Let you believe what you believe and give you small moments of connection without the anxiety and the fear. Every Tuesday you come here and for a few hours I get to be with my mom again. It is not the same as having you remember me, but it is something, and something is better than nothing. I sat there in that yellow house surrounded by photographs of a life I had lived and lost, and I felt something inside me break apart and rearrange itself, because I had been so certain that Richard was betraying me, that he had replaced me with someone whose mind was not broken, that I was being abandoned because the disease had made me too difficult to love. But the truth was so much more beautiful and so much more heartbreaking than anything I could have imagined. Richard had not been hiding another wife. He had been protecting me from the pain of knowing about a daughter I could not remember. Every Tuesday he had been giving me the gift of time with my child, even though I would forget it as soon as it was over, even though it meant watching me fail to recognize my own daughter over and over again. That is when I understood the heaviness Richard carried home on Tuesday evenings. It was not guilt, it was grief. The grief of loving someone who is slowly disappearing, of having to introduce yourself to your own wife, of knowing that no matter how many Tuesdays you have together, they will never be enough because she will never truly come back to you. And Sarah, dear Sarah, who I should have known but did not, she carried that grief too, the grief of having a mother who looks at you with a stranger's eyes, who has forgotten your birth and your childhood, and every moment of love you ever shared. How do you do it? I asked her, my voice barely a whisper. How do you keep coming back every Tuesday knowing I will not remember? Sarah smiled through her tears. Because you are my mother, she said simply. Because even if you do not remember me, I remember you. I remember the way you sang to me when I was scared at night. I remember how you taught me to bake and to garden and to be brave even when things are hard. I remember every sacrifice you made and every time you put my happiness before your own. And if spending every Tuesday showing you photographs and telling you stories is what I can do for you now, then that is what I will do. Because love does not stop just because memory does. We sat together on that couch for a long time, Sarah and I, mother and daughter, separated by a disease that had stolen the bond we once shared, but could not quite destroy the love underneath. She told me stories about my life, about the time I accidentally dyed all of Richard's white shirts pink in the laundry, and we laughed until we cried. About the Christmas I tried to cook a turkey and forgot to take the giblets out, and we ended up ordering pizza instead. About the day she got married, and I cried so hard during the ceremony that I could barely get through my mother of the bride speech. And as she talked, I could almost see these memories, could almost feel them hovering just out of reach like dreams you can almost remember but not quite. Sarah showed me more photographs, Me holding Michael as a newborn, his tiny fist wrapped around my finger. Me teaching Sarah to ride a bike, running alongside her with one hand on the seat, ready to catch her if she fell. Me and Richard surrounded by our grandchildren, our arms full of squirming, giggling bodies, our faces shining with the kind of joy that only grandparents know. Every picture was proof of a life fully lived, a family fully loved, decades of moments that the disease had erased from my mind, but could not erase from existence. And then Sarah pulled out one more photograph. It was recent, taken maybe a month ago, based on how Richard and I looked in it. We were sitting on this very couch, Sarah between us, all of us looking at the camera. I had no memory of this photograph being taken, but what struck me was the expression on my face. I was smiling, genuinely smiling, and looking at Sarah with such warmth and affection that even though I could not remember the moment, I could see the love there, even in my confused state, even without the memories to tell me who she was. Some part of me had recognized her, some part of me had known. "Do I always forget?" I asked. "Every single time?" Sarah nodded. "Most of the time, by the next morning, you have forgotten you were even here. Sometimes Dad says you wake up confused about why you are so tired, why your emotions feel so close to the surface, but you do not remember me or the photographs or the stories. The disease takes it all away again. Then why am I remembering now? Why is this time different?" Sarah looked at me carefully. "I do not know," she said. "Maybe because you followed Dad here on your own. Maybe because you came to the door determined to confront what you thought was the truth. Maybe the shock of it broke through somehow. Or maybe you are just having one of those moments of clarity that sometimes happen, where the fog lifts just enough for you to see what has been hidden. The doctors say the brain is complicated and Alzheimer's is unpredictable. All I know is that right now, in this moment, you are here and you are understanding, and that is more than we usually get." I looked down at my notebook, at all the careful notes I had made to myself. Tuesday, Richard gone 2 to 6. Richard says community center, but eyes say something different. Follow him. Find the truth. The truth I had found was not at all what I expected, and it was somehow both worse and better than anything I could have imagined. Worse because I had forgotten my own children, had lost decades of memories that should have been sacred and permanent. Better because Richard had not betrayed me, had not replaced me, had not stopped loving me even though I was broken. "I need to tell you something before you go," Sarah said, squeezing my hand. "I need you to hear this while you still can. You have always been the most incredible mother. Even now, even with the disease, even on the days when you do not know who I am, you are still kind and gentle and loving. The Alzheimer's has not changed who you are at your core. It has taken your memories, but it has not taken your heart. And I need you to know that we do not resent you for forgetting us. We do not love you any less. We are not waiting for you to get better or wishing you were different. We love you exactly as you are, right now, in this moment. And we will keep loving you through every Tuesday and every forgotten conversation and every time you wake up thinking you never had children at all." The tears I had been holding back finally came then, pouring down my face in great heaving sobs that shook my whole body. Sarah wrapped her arms around me and held me while I cried. This daughter I had carried and birthed and raised and loved and completely forgotten. She rocked me gently the way I must have rocked her when she was small, and she whispered that it was okay, that everything was going to be okay, that I was not alone in this even when my mind told me I was. When I finally stopped crying, Sarah helped me clean up my face and walked me out to where Marcus was still patiently waiting in the taxi. She hugged me tight at the door and told me she loved me and that she would see me next Tuesday. I nodded even though I knew I would not remember this conversation by next Tuesday, would not remember her or the yellow house or the photographs that proved I had lived a fuller life than my broken brain could recall. But for now, in this moment, I remembered, and that would have to be enough. Marcus drove me home in silence, respecting the weight of whatever had just happened, understanding that some things are too big for conversation. When we pulled up to my house, Richard's blue sedan was not yet in the driveway. I had beaten him home. I paid Marcus and thanked him, and went inside to the house that sometimes feels familiar and sometimes does not. I sat at the kitchen table with my notebook and I tried to write down what had happened, tried to capture it in words before the disease took it away from me like it takes everything else. But how do you write down something like this? How do you condense the weight of discovering you have children into a few sentences that will make sense tomorrow when you read them back? In the end, I wrote simply, "You have a daughter named Sarah. She loves you. Richard takes you to see her every Tuesday. You forget, but she remembers. Trust this even when your mind says it cannot be true." Richard came home an hour later. He found me at the kitchen table, my notebook open in front of me, tears still wet on my cheeks. His face went pale when he saw me. "Margaret," he said carefully, "are you all right? Did something happen?" "I followed you today," I told him. "I went to the yellow house. I met Sarah." Richard closed his eyes, and I watched the pain move across his face like a shadow. When he opened them again, they were full of tears. "I am so sorry," he said. "I know you must be confused and scared, and I am so sorry we did not tell you. We were just trying to protect you, trying to make things easier." I stood up and crossed the kitchen to where he stood. I put my hands on his face and made him look at me. "You have been carrying this alone," I said. "All of it. The grief of losing me piece by piece, the burden of keeping Sarah a secret, the weight of watching me forget our children over and over again. You have been protecting me when you are the one who needs protecting." Richard broke down then. This strong man who had held me together through 3 years of deterioration finally let himself fall apart. He cried like I had cried at Sarah's house, great wrenching sobs that came from somewhere deep and wounded and exhausted. I held him the way Sarah had held me, the way I must have held our children when they were small, and the world was too much for them to bear alone. "I am so tired," he whispered against my shoulder. "I am so tired of losing you. I am so tired of pretending to be strong. I am so tired of watching you slip away and knowing there is nothing I can do to stop it." "I know," I said. "I know, my love. I know." We stood like that for a long time, two people who had built a life together and were now watching it crumble, holding on to each other in the wreckage. And I thought about Sarah and her Tuesday visits, about Michael in California with our grandchildren I could not remember, about all the love that had surrounded me that I had been unable to see because the disease had blinded me to it. I thought about how I had been so certain that Richard was betraying me when all along he had been sacrificing himself for me, had been bearing the unbearable so that I would not have to. If you are still watching, if you have stayed with me through this whole story, I need to tell you something important. I do not know how long I will remember what happened today. I do not know if tomorrow I will wake up thinking I am childless again, thinking Richard has been lying to me, thinking I am being replaced and forgotten and left behind. The disease does not let me keep the things I learn, or the revelations I have, or the moments of clarity that break through the fog. But for right now, in this moment, I understand something I need you to understand too. When someone you love has Alzheimer's or dementia, when you are watching them forget you and forget themselves and forget everything you built together, it is easy to feel like you are losing them, and they are losing you, and there is nothing but loss in every direction you look. But the truth is more complicated than that, because even when I cannot remember Sarah's name or recognize her face or recall a single moment of raising her, some part of me still knows her. Some part of me still loves her. The disease can take my memories, but it cannot take the love that created those memories in the first place. That love remains deep in my bones, older than words, stronger than the pathways in my brain that are breaking down and falling apart. And to everyone who is caring for someone with this disease, everyone who shows up week after week to visit someone who might not remember the last visit, or the one before that, everyone who tells the same stories over and over to ears that have forgotten hearing them, I want you to know that it matters. Your presence matters. Your love matters. Even when it seems like it is disappearing into the void of their broken memory, even when they look at you with a stranger's eyes, even when they cannot say your name or recall your relationship, on some level deeper than consciousness or memory or recognition, they know you are there. They know they are loved, and that knowing lives in a place the disease cannot quite reach. If this story has touched you, if you have seen yourself or your loved ones in Margaret and Richard and Sarah, I want to invite you to be part of our community. This channel exists as a place where we share these stories not to make you sad, but to make you feel less alone. Every video is a reminder that there are others walking this same impossible path, others who understand the heartbreak and the exhaustion, and the tiny moments of grace that get you through one more day. Subscribe to this channel and you will find comfort here. Subscribe and you will find validation for your grief and your love and your endurance. Subscribe because we need each other, because no one should have to face this darkness alone, because together we can hold the light for each other when our own hands are too tired to carry it anymore. The truth that I discovered when I followed my husband to his secret Tuesday destination was not the betrayal I feared. It was something far more profound. It was the truth that love persists even when memory fails, that family continues even when recognition fades, that the bonds we create with each other live in places deeper than the mind can access or the disease can destroy. Richard has not been hiding another wife. He has been protecting the one he has, shepherding me through the darkness, making sure I am never truly alone, even when I cannot remember who is beside me. Tomorrow I might forget all of this. I might wake up confused about why my eyes are swollen from crying, or why my heart feels tender and bruised. I might look at Richard and wonder again where he goes on Tuesdays, might write in my notebook to follow him, might go through this entire revelation all over again, or I might not. The disease is unpredictable in its cruelty and its small mercies, but tonight, right now, I remember. I remember that I have a daughter named Sarah who plants chrysanthemums because they were my favorite. I remember that I have a son named Michael who lives in California with 3 grandchildren who apparently have my eyes. I remember that Richard has been carrying an unbearable burden with grace and love and unwavering devotion. And I remember this: I am still here. I still matter. The disease is taking my memories, but it is not taking my worth. I am still a mother, even when I cannot remember being one. I am still a wife, even when I cannot remember my wedding day. I am still myself, even when I cannot quite recall who that self used to be. And so are you. If you are watching this and living with this disease or loving someone who is, you are still here. You still matter. Your confusion does not diminish you. Your forgotten moments do not erase your value. Your broken brain does not make you broken as a person. This is what I learned when I followed my husband to 428 Maple Street and discovered his secret life. I learned that the secrets we keep from each other are sometimes acts of love rather than betrayal. I learned that being forgotten is not the same as being unloved. I learned that memory is just one way of knowing someone, and that there are deeper ways, older ways, ways that live in the body and the heart, and survive even when the mind cannot. I learned that every Tuesday for 2 years, Richard has been giving me time with my daughter even though I cannot keep it, and that this gift matters even if I cannot remember receiving it. I learned that I am not as alone as I thought I was, that the woman I saw on the porch was not my replacement but my child, that the life I thought I had lived childless and simple was actually rich and full and complicated and beautiful, that I have been loved more deeply and more faithfully than I could have imagined even in my darkest moments of suspicion and fear. And I learned that you, watching this, you are not alone either. Whether you are the person with the disease or the person loving someone who has it, whether you are forgetting or being forgotten, whether you are the one who leaves every Tuesday or the one who is left behind, you are part of a community of people who understand this unique and terrible grief. You are seen, you are heard, you matter. That night, after Richard and I held each other in the kitchen, after the tears had stopped and we had moved to the living room to sit together in the gentle darkness, I asked him to tell me everything. Tell me about Sarah's childhood, I said. Tell me about Michael. Tell me about the life I cannot remember but need to hear about anyway. And so he did. He sat beside me on our old couch, the one we bought 20 years ago that I cannot remember purchasing, and he painted pictures with his words of moments I should have been able to recall on my own. He told me about the day Sarah was born, how I labored for 16 hours and refused all medication because I wanted to be fully present for every moment, how I cried when they placed her in my arms and said she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. He told me about Michael coming along 3 years later, an easier birth but a more difficult baby, how he cried constantly for the first 6 months until we discovered he had reflux, and once we treated it, he became the most cheerful child imaginable. Richard's voice was soft and careful as he spoke, as if he was handling something fragile, something precious that might break if he was not gentle enough. He told me about the first day of kindergarten when Sarah cried and held onto my leg, and I had to peel her fingers away one by one while my own heart was breaking. He told me about the time Michael fell out of a tree and broke his arm, and how I stayed calm and collected until we got home from the hospital, and then fell apart in the bathroom where the children could not see. He told me about family vacations to the beach where we would build sandcastles that the tide would wash away, about camping trips where we sang songs around the fire and told ghost stories that were more funny than scary, about holidays when our house would be filled with extended family and laughter and the smell of too much food cooking all at once. Every story Richard told was like a gift, a small piece of myself being returned to me even though I knew I would not be able to keep it. I listened with hunger, with desperate attention, trying to absorb these moments into whatever part of my brain still worked properly, knowing even as I tried that it was futile. The disease would take them again, maybe tonight while I slept, maybe tomorrow morning, maybe next week. But for now, they were mine, and I held on to them with everything I had. He told me about Sarah's wedding day, how she looked so much like I had looked on our wedding day that it took his breath away, how I had fussed over her dress and her hair and cried through the entire ceremony. He told me about Michael's graduation from college, how proud we were, how I had saved every report card and every school project and made scrapbooks that documented his entire academic career. He told me about the grandchildren, about Emma, who is 8 and loves to draw, about Jacob, who is 6 and wants to be an astronaut, about little Lily, who is 4 and asks a million questions about everything she sees. These children, these grandchildren, these people who share my blood and my history but who I cannot place in my memory, Richard spoke about them with such love and such sorrow that I could feel the weight of what he had been carrying. Every Tuesday he went to Sarah's house and brought me with him and introduced me to my own daughter all over again. Every Tuesday he watched me fail to recognize her, watched the pain in her eyes when I could not remember her name, watched our family try to pretend that everything was normal when nothing about this situation was normal at all. "How do you stand it?" I asked him. "How do you watch me forget our children and not hate me for it?" Richard took my hand and held it between both of his. His hands were wrinkled and spotted with age, no longer the strong young hands that had slipped a wedding ring onto my finger 47 years ago, but they still felt safe and familiar and like home. "I could never hate you," he said. "Not for this. Not for something you cannot control. Margaret, you did not choose this disease. You did not ask for it. You would give anything to remember Sarah and Michael. I know you would. This is not your fault. And even when you cannot remember them, you are still their mother. Even when you cannot recall their names or their faces, the love you have for them still exists somewhere inside you. I see it in the way you smile at Sarah when she shows you photographs. I see it in the way you lean into her when she hugs you goodbye. Your mind might forget, but your heart remembers." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to trust that somewhere beneath all the broken synapses and tangled proteins and dying brain cells, there was still a mother who knew her children even if she could not name them. But it felt like such small comfort in the face of such enormous loss. What good is love if you cannot remember why you love or who you are loving? What value does a relationship have when one person has to reintroduce themselves every single week? But then I thought about that afternoon at Sarah's house, about the way I had felt when I looked at her even before I knew she was my daughter. There had been something there, some pull, some inexplicable warmth that I could not quite explain. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe love does live deeper than memory. Maybe the connection between a mother and child is written into something more fundamental than the neural pathways that Alzheimer's destroys. Maybe I had been recognizing her all along without knowing why. The next morning, I woke up and the memory was gone. I read the note I had left myself in my notebook, the one that said I had a daughter named Sarah, and it felt like a story someone had made up, like fiction rather than fact. I showed the note to Richard over breakfast and asked him if it was true, if we really had children I could not remember. He nodded slowly, his eyes sad, and said, "Yes, it was true. We had 2 beautiful children and 3 grandchildren, and I had been a wonderful mother to all of them." I asked him why he had never told me before, and he said he had many times, but the disease made it hard for me to hold on to that information. I asked if I could see pictures, and he brought out the photo albums and we sat together looking at images of people who were apparently my family, but who I could not quite connect to any memories in my mind. "This is Sarah," Richard said, pointing to a young woman in a blue dress. "This is our daughter. You gave birth to her 52 years ago. You named her after your grandmother." I looked at the photograph and tried to feel something, tried to find some spark of recognition or connection, but there was nothing. Just a pleasant-looking woman who happened to be standing next to me in a picture. I felt like a terrible person for not remembering, for not feeling the rush of maternal love that should have accompanied looking at my own child's face. But the disease had taken that from me along with everything else. "Do I see her?" I asked. Does she come to visit? Richard hesitated, and I could see him weighing how much to tell me, how much truth I could handle before the anxiety and confusion became too much. Every Tuesday I take you to her house, he said finally. We spend the afternoon there. She shows you pictures and tells you stories about your life together. It helps you feel connected even when you cannot remember. Why every Tuesday? I asked. Why not more often? Because it is hard, Richard said, and his voice broke just a little. It is hard for her to watch you not know who she is. It is hard for you when you get confused and upset. Tuesday afternoons are manageable. More than that might be too much for everyone. I sat with that information, tried to process what it meant. I had a daughter who loved me enough to see me every single week, even though I could not remember her from one visit to the next. I had a husband who facilitated those visits, who drove me to her house and helped me through the confusion, who carried the weight of our family's grief so that I would not have to. I had built a life full of love and connection and meaning, and the disease was systematically erasing all of it, leaving me stranded in a present that made no sense without the context of the past. The days blurred together after that. Some mornings I would wake up and remember the note about Sarah, would ask Richard questions about our children, would try desperately to hold on to the information he gave me. Other mornings I would wake up and the note would mean nothing, would just be words on a page that I had apparently written but did not understand. The disease was unpredictable in what it took and what it left behind, in what could be relearned temporarily and what was gone forever. But every Tuesday Richard would help me into the car and drive me to a yellow house with white shutters and a garden full of chrysanthemums. And every Tuesday, a woman named Sarah would open the door with tears in her eyes and welcome me inside like I was someone precious and important and deeply loved. And even though I could not remember who she was or why she looked at me with such tenderness, some part of me always felt safe in that house, always felt like I belonged there in a way I could not quite explain. Sarah never made me feel bad for not remembering her. She never acted hurt or angry or frustrated when I would ask the same questions I had asked the week before or the week before that. She would just smile and show me the photographs again, tell me the stories again, hold my hand, and remind me again that I was her mother and she was my daughter, and our love for each other was real, even if I could not recall the years we had spent building that love together. Sometimes in those Tuesday afternoon visits, small things would feel familiar, even if I could not say why. The smell of vanilla candles would make me feel warm and content. The softness of the blanket on her couch would seem comforting in a way that went beyond simple texture. The sound of her voice would settle something anxious in my chest, even before I understood what she was saying. These tiny recognitions were not the same as memory, but they were something. Small breadcrumbs that suggested maybe Richard was right. Maybe love does live somewhere the disease cannot quite reach. I want to pause here and talk directly to those of you who are living some version of this story. Maybe you are the person with Alzheimer's or dementia, watching yourself forget the people you love most in the world. Maybe you are the family member who gets forgotten, who has to reintroduce yourself over and over, who has to smile through the pain of not being recognized by someone who used to know you better than anyone. Maybe you are the caregiver holding everything together, carrying the weight of memory for two people, trying to be strong enough for both of you. Whoever you are in this story, I need you to know that what you are doing matters immensely. To the people with the disease, the ones who are forgetting, you are not failing. Your worth is not determined by your ability to remember. You are still a full and complete person deserving of love and dignity and respect, even when your mind is betraying you. The fact that you cannot recall your children's names or your wedding anniversary or what you had for breakfast does not make you less valuable as a human being. Your family knows this. They love you not because of your memory, but because of who you are at your core, the essential self that exists beneath all the forgotten moments and lost names. To the family members who are being forgotten, your pain is real and valid. It is okay to grieve the relationship you used to have while still loving the person who remains. It is okay to feel hurt when your mother does not recognize you, or your husband introduces himself to you like a stranger. It is okay to cry in the car after visits that were harder than usual, to feel exhausted by the repetition, to wish desperately that just once they would remember without having to be reminded. Your grief does not make you selfish or ungrateful. It makes you human. And I promise you that on some level deeper than conscious memory, they know you. They feel your love even when they cannot name its source. Your presence matters even when it seems to disappear into the void of their broken memory. To the caregivers carrying the weight of this disease for both yourself and the person you love, you are doing something heroic and difficult, and largely thankless. You are watching someone you love disappear while still being required to take care of their physical needs, manage their medications, handle their confusion and anxiety, and maintain your own sanity in the midst of it all. You are grieving a loss that happens slowly over years rather than all at once, which is its own special kind of torture. Please be gentle with yourself. Please ask for help when you need it. Please remember that you cannot pour from an empty cup, and taking care of yourself is not selfish, but necessary. You are doing the best you can in an impossible situation, and that is enough. There were days when the disease would lift just slightly, when I would have moments of unusual clarity where the fog would thin enough for me to see through it. On those days, I would understand with painful lucidity exactly what I had lost and what I was losing. I would look at Richard and see not just my husband, but the young man I had married, and I would remember fragments of our early years together, the way he used to make me laugh, the dreams we had shared for our future.